In the quiet library, Wine wandered between the towering shelves, her fingers slightly tracing the spines of the books. Which book should I read today? She murmured to herself, scanning the endless titles. After a few minutes, her eyes landed on a novel titled Whispers in the Shadows. Intrigued, she whispered the name softly. This looks interesting. A small smile, she pulled the book off the shelf, carried it to a nearby table, and settled down. Plugging in her earphones, she played a soft piano melody, letting the soothing notes drift into her mind. Just as she opened the first page, the sudden sound of the book slamming shut startled her. She froze. I have been searching everywhere for you. Her heart skipped a beat and cold sweat prickled her skin. That voice, she looked up, meeting Jungkook's piercing gaze. His tone was cold, yet there was a teasing edge to it. Why? She stammered, her voice barely audible. Jungkook leaned against the table, his expression unreadable. Don't you know your responsibilities? Wine blinking confident, her mind racing. I already did your homework. What else do you need? He raised an eyebrow, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Professor Luna assigned us an essay. Did you forget? Wine's eyes widened as realization hit her. Oh, here's the assignment. It needs to be done by tomorrow, or else. He leaned closer, his face mere inches from hers. The weight of his presence made her breathe hitch. You know what happens? Her voice wavered as she nodded slowly, the heat of his closeness overwhelming. With that, he pushed the paper toward her and walked away. His steps echoing in the silent library. Left alone, Wine let out a shaky breath. Jungkook's sudden appearances always left her unnerved. Jungkook had made it his mission to make her life difficult. Though he never hurt her physically, his words cut deeper than any wound. His teasing wasn't light hearted, it was calculated, meant to annoy her. But Wine never fought back. She couldn't bring herself to respond to his cruelty. She was kind hearted, someone who believed in peace over conflict. She simply wanted to focus on her studies, earn her degree, and achieve her dreams. But fate seemed to have other plans. Jungkook was like a storm she couldn't escape, always appearing where she least expected, always finding ways to shake her resolve. After her classes, Wine found solace in the library, a place where she could momentarily forget his cutting remarks. Mr. Han, the librarian and a close friend of her father, understood her love for books and granted her special permission to stay after hours. It was her sanctuary, her escape from the chaos of reality. But even, but even there, Jungkook's shadow loomed. No matter how much she tried to distance herself, it seemed impossible to avoid him, and the pain his words inflicted. The next day, the alarm blared loudly, jarring wide awake. Her eyes widened as she glanced at the time on her phone. Oh no, I'm late. Throwing the blanket off, she scrambled out of bed, quickly freshening up and changing into her usual college attire. Living alone in her small apartment in Seoul wasn't easy, but it was the price she paid for pursuing her education far from home. Her parents lived in Busan, and though she missed them dearly, she knew this was the only way to achieve her dreams. Rushing to the kitchen, she grabbed a piece of bread, hastily spread some jam over it, and stuffed it into her mouth. As she gathered her things, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts assignments, books, Jungkook's essay. Balancing her bag awkwardly on his shoulder, she reached for the door, locking it with a click. She paused for a moment, letting out a long sigh as she tried to steady her breath. Wallet, his assignment, books, and the door is locked carefully, she whispered to herself, mentally ticking off her checklist. Adjusting her hair softly, she tucked a few stray strands behind her ear and straightened her posture. All right, let's go. She mumbled with determination, stepping out into the bustling streets of Seoul. At the college, when walked toward her locker, her mind focused on retrieving the books she needed her for lecture. She swung the locker door open, her fingers searching for the right textbooks when a voice called out to her. It must be him, she thought, her heart skipping a beat at the possibility. But when she turned around, relief washed over her. It wasn't Jungkook. Jimmy stood there, a warm smile lighting up his face. He was as charming as ever, with a softness in his eyes that always put her at ease. Jimin had been her best friend since school, someone who had always been there for her. But things had changed. Because of Jungkook, she found herself keeping a distance from him, fearing the consequences of their interactions. Hello, Ryan, how are you? Wine offered a polite smile, her voice steady. I'm good, Jimin, thank you. She grabbed her books and was about to excuse herself when he reached out and gently catched her wrist, stopping her in her tracks. Ryan, why are you ignoring your chim chim? His voice was soft, almost pleading, and his eyes held a hint of hurt. She felt a pang of guilt, but quickly masked it. No, Jimin, I'm not ignoring you. It's just I'm running late for class. Jimin tilted his head, studying her as if he could see right through her words. Is that so? Then let's go together. Wine hesitated for a moment before nodding, knowing she couldn't refuse him. He's my friend, after all, she reminded herself. As they walked side by side, Jimin's cheerful chatter filled the air, easing her nerves slightly. What she didn't realize, however, was that someone was watching them from a distance. Jungkook's eyes followed their every move. His jaw clenched, and a storm brewed within him as he watched Jimin's hand linger on Wine's wrist. The rage in his eyes was unmistakable, and though he remained silent, his presence was as heavy as thunderclouds before a storm. In class, Jimin sat beside Wine, his cheerful demeanor contrasting with her unease. She glanced around the room but couldn't spot Jungkook anywhere. Didn't he come today? She whispered to herself, her heart feeling oddly lighter at his absence. When the time came to submit assignments, she handed in both hers and Jungkook's, just as she always did. Despite his coldness and his sharp words, she couldn't risk defying him. Later, in the canteen, Jimin stuck close to her side. He was unusually persistent, and Wine couldn't understand why. Normally, she avoided him, not because she wanted to, but because Jungkook had made it clear that she wasn't to talk to anyone except him. Where are you going? Mine, he asked as she stood up. Oh, I just need to use the restroom, she replied, her voice soft. Oh, okay. Leaving him behind, she made her way to the restroom. After freshening up, she began washing her hands when suddenly the lights flickered and went out. The room plunged into darkness and an eerie silence settled. Fumbling for her phone in her pocket, her heart sank when she realized the battery was dead. Of course, I forgot to charge it this morning, she thought, biting her lip nervously. The faint light from the small upper window wasn't enough to brighten the room. As she tried to calm herself, she felt it, a presence. Her breath hissed. Is there anyone here? She called out, her voice trembling. No response. Before she could move, strong arms cased her from behind, trapping her against the sink. Her pulse quickened as the unmistakable scent of his cologne filled her senses. Chonguk, she whispered, barely audible. A low chuckle echoed behind her, sending a shiver down her spine. You have a good memory. You turned towards him. His voice was dangerously close, and she felt his breath brush against her neck. He leaned in, closing the already small distance between them. Wine instinctively placed her hands on his chest to create some space, her fingers trembling against his firm belt. What do you want? Jungkook's eyes, though hidden by the shadows, bore into hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. Do you think you can disobey me? Her lips parted, but no words came out. She shook her head, trying to explain. I didn't approach him. He just started coming my way. His jaw tightened at her words, and his voice dropped to a menacing growl. How dare he touch your wrist, huh? His sudden shout echoed in the confined space, making her flinch. Before she could react, he grabbed her wrists and twisted them behind her back, forcing her closer to him. A sharp pain shot through her arms, and she winced. You're hurting me, Chongo. But her plea only seemed to fuel his rage. Keep your this little mouth shut before I use it somewhere else. Her eyes widened at his words, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. Summoning her courage, she muttered under her breath, I hate you. His expression darkened and his grip on her wrists tightened. The air grew heavier, the tension crackling like a storm about to break. Hate me all you want, but don't forget who owns you. His voice was low, almost a whisper, yet it carried a weight that left her breathless. In that moment, she realized no matter how much she wanted to escape him, his shadow would always loom over her. Jungkook left that restroom, but not before leaning in close, his voice low and threatening. Remember, disobeying me has consequences. Don't make me remind you again. He walked out, leaving wine shaken. Gathering herself, she headed back to class and ignored Jimin completely. Her mind too preoccupied with the weight of Jungkook's warning. The next day, Jimin was absent. Wine sat alone in the classroom, her gaze fixed on the empty seat beside her. She was scribbling in her notebook when out of nowhere Jungkook appeared. He walked in quietly, taking a seat beside her from the last row. What are you doing here? She stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. From now on, I will sit with you. Her heart raced at his declaration, confusion swirling in her mind. Why? She asked, her words hesitant. Because I want to. Any problem? She shook her head in denial, knowing better than to argue. When the professor entered, Jungkook leaned back, resting his head on the desk and closing his eyes. Wine noticed how even the professor didn't dare to reprimand him. Of course, no one would. Jungkook's father owned the entire campus. Losing their job wasn't an option for anyone. Break time. During the break, Wine found herself stealing glances at Jungkook. His eyes were still closed, his dark hair falling perfectly across his forehead. He looked almost peaceful, handsome in a way that made her heart skip a beat. She noticed how a strand of hair was slightly bothering him, so without thinking, she reached out and gently pushed it aside. Just as her fingers brushed his hair, his expression shifted from calm to nudge. A picture will last longer. I know I'm handsome, but staring is rude. Wine's cheeks flushed red as she abruptly turned her gaze away, looking anywhere but at him. She barely had a moment to recover when he stood grabbing her wrist and led her to the canteen. In the canteen, they ordered coffee along with something simple to eat, while Choco grabbed his usual banana milk. He sat across from her at the table, entirely unfazed by the stares and whispers of the other students. Wine, on the other hand, felt the weight of their judgmental looks pressing down on her. Before she could say anything, a girl stormed toward them, her face twisted with anger. Wine recognized her immediately. Hewon, the campus queen bee and daughter of a billionaire who had business ties with Jungkook's father. Without warning, Hewon dumped an entire glass of juice over wine, making her gasp in shock. What is this for? Hewon's voice was sharp and mocking. What are you doing with him? Wine wiped the juice from her face, trying to remain calm. I didn't beg him to come after me. Hewon's eyes narrowed dangerously. You dare talk back to me? Before Wine could respond, Hewon slapped her across the face. Wine staggered, her hand instinctively flying to her stinging cheek. But before Hyewon could say anything else, someone yanked her backward. Jungkook stood there, his expression colder than ever. Without hesitation, he slapped Hyewon across the face, the sound echoing in the now silent canteen. Hyewon's turned to face him, only to be met with his icy glare. Don't you dare lay a hand on her again. I know the girls like you. When you see a handsome and rich man, you just spread your legs for them. And this was it. There was another slap from him. When she opened her mouth to retort, he grabbed her by the neck, his grip tightening as he leaned closer. Don't you dare say those filthy things about her that suits you more. Yvonne clawed at his hands, her tears streaming as she struggled to breathe. The other students watched in stern silence, too afraid to intervene. Apologize to her now. I won't. She choked out, but his grip tightened, making her cough and gasp for air. Wine couldn't take it anymore. She reached out, her hand gently resting on Jungkook's arm. Let her go, Jungkook. Please. She sniffled, her voice trembling. His cold eyes softened slightly as he glanced at her. After a long moment, he loosened his grip. Say sorry. Her one defeated stammered through her tears. Sorry. Jungkook finally let her go, and her friends rushed to her side, dragging her out of the canteen. The murmurs around the room grew louder, but Jungkook's sharp voice cut through the noise. Is there a drama playing here? Do your own work unless you all want to die. The students quickly returned to their meals and conversations, leaving Wine to sit in stern silence. Her mind racing with questions. Why had he defended her? Needing some air, Wine quietly left the canteen and climbed the stairs to the rooftop. The cool breeze hit her face, calming her nerves. She leaned against the railing, staring out at the city skyline. Lost in thought, however, her moment of peace was short lived. Footsteps echoed behind her, and she turned to see Jungkook walking toward her. His expression unreadable, he stopped in his tracks, his sharp gaze lowering to her shirt. A hint of irritation flashed across his face when he noticed the fabric was slightly transparent due to the juice earlier. Without a word, he shrugged off his jacket and held it out to her. Wear this. Wine blinked in surprise, looking between him and the jacket. Why are you doing this, Jungkook? She asked, her voice shaking. One moment you hurt me, and the next you are protecting me. Please don't do this. I will take it the wrong way. He stepped closer, his tall frame towering over her. His voice was low and teasing as he leaned in. In which way? She instinctively stepped back, but her retreat was cut short as her back hit the railing. He trapped her with his arms, leaning down so their faces were just inches apart. I'll think that you care for me. Her voice wavered as she stuttered the words. Jungkook smirked, his dark eyes locked on hers. Is that so? Should I say it then, or are my actions already shouting that I do? Her eyes widened at his words, her breath catching in her throat. What do you mean? She whispered. Instead of answering, Jungkook cupped her cheek gently, his fingers warm against her skin, and placed a soft kiss on her forehead. One froze, her mind racing as much as she wanted to hold on to her anger and resentment. She couldn't deny the truth. His words might hurt, but his actions always protected her. Jungkook pulled back slightly, his intense gaze meeting hers. Oh, her eyes widened in shock as her words tumbled out. Wait, what? Jungkook raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by her reaction. Are you shocked? She nodded, her lips parted as she tried to process his confession. But you always bully me. He chuckled softly, his expression softening as he reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. Because I wanted to be near you. Always. I thought teasing you was the only way to keep you close. But you know what? I realized today if you like someone, you should confess. Maybe, just maybe they will feel the same. And we shouldn't let anything, not even our fears, come between us. Her eyes welled up with tears, her emotions a mix of confusion, vulnerability, and an odd sense of warmth at his words. She would get it nervously with her fingers, unable to meet his gaze. So, don't you like me? She nodded while biting her lips. Chungkook leaned closer, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. The teasing smirk returning to his lips. And if you keep biting your lips like that, don't blame me if I do something about it. Her eyes snapped up to meet his, her cheeks burning as she stammered. Jungkook laughed softly, clearly enjoying her flustered reaction. Jungkook took a deep breath, his intense gaze softening as he stepped closer to her. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. I'm sorry, I have been harsh with you. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Wai looked up at him, unsure of what to say, her heart pounding in her chest. He saw the vulnerability in her eyes, and it only made his feelings more complicated. His thumb brushed over her cheek as he leaned in slightly, his voice low and deliberate. But don't think for a second that I will let you go. If I wanted, I could make you beg for me. You wouldn't even know what hit you.